Okay, so let's start by talking about classes. Oops, so classes, objects, and methods. And these three terms are commonly confused, especially for beginners in object-oriented programming. And I'll be talking mostly from a Java perspective, although this can apply to many other object-oriented programming languages as well. So in this video, I hope to give you guys an intuitive understanding of classes, objects, and methods. And if you understand what these three terms mean, hopefully you can, you know, immerse yourself in object-oriented programming, just like Java. So let's actually start by drawing a robot here. And let's say that you had a robot here, right? So I'll draw a robot. And this robot, let's actually name him, okay? Let's name him Alex, okay? So the name of this robot would be Alex. And currently this robot is useless, right? It doesn't know anything, okay? You built this robot, but it can't really do anything other than just sit there, right? So you want it to be useful, right? And let's say you want this robot to be able to do certain math operations, certain basic math operations. So let's say you want it to be able to, so let's say math operations here. And let's say you want it to be able to add numbers, subtract numbers, multiply, and divide, okay? So you want it to be able to do these four operations, right? So in particular, if you feed the robot two numbers, let's say add 4 and 6 into the robot, it should output 10, right? And let's say if you input multiply 2 and 3, for example, it should output 6, right? And it should be able to do subtract and divide as well, right? So what would you do? Well, the most basic way you can start is by, defining what these operations are, right? So let's say you can create a file here, right? And you can create a, in the file, you can start by writing out, sorry. So in the file, you can start by writing out the definitions of these functions, right? Let's just call these functions for now. So the add function, for example, takes in two numbers, and you can say return. Return just means output, a plus b. Subtract, you can say, once again, take two numbers and it returns a minus b, and so on and so forth, right? You hopefully for multiply, you know that it's return a times b, and for divide, it's a divided by b, right? And this is, by the way, just a pseudocode. I'm not following the exact Java syntax here, just the pseudocode, right? And let's call these list of functions, let's group them into a header called math operations, right? So these are the math operations that Alex, the robot, should be able to perform, right? So now that we have a list of all these operations that the robot should be able to perform, we can now, let's say you've written all the definitions for these functions, and so now you can actually feed the file into the robot. So you can load this file much like you would load any file on the computer. You load the file, okay? So now Alex, right, who was once clueless about how to do math operations, can now follow these commands, and now it can actually do the operations, right? So if you feed in Now, if you feed an add 4, 6, it should be able to output 10, and if you feed and multiply 2, 3, it should be able to output 6, right? So now Alex is well equipped with all the basic math operations, and he should be able to perform them. So if you understand what all this is, then pretty much you should be able to understand classes, objects, and methods, right? So the robot here, okay, so Alex was an object over here, right? So an object is, actually, let me just start a new page here. So let's actually say a term here, okay, term. Definition, and let's say example, right? So let's actually extend this for now, right? So the first term would be, let's actually define what an object is, right? Object. Okay. An object was the robot, okay? So it was actually the physical robot that actually performed the operations, right? So in this case, this robot right here, right? This robot right here, this physical robot, that was the object, okay? That's what object refers to. So in Java, I don't know why they call it object, they use fancy terms, but it really is just the robot that performs operations, right? And the example, well, in this case, it was, we use a different color, let's say yellow. In this case, it was Alex, right? Ooh, that's a really bad color. Let me choose blue, right? In this case, the example was Alex, right? Alex was the name of the robot or the object, right? So the next term is, let's actually define what a method is, right? A method was what I referred to as functions, right? So okay, it's really the function, okay? And the example was, one example of a method was add, okay? And then you had subtract. Subtract is another method, multiply, right? And divide. So you have 4 methods, okay? And finally, what is a class? Okay, so a class, which most Java textbooks or object-oriented programming textbook would say is a blueprint, is a prototype, right? When I first read that, it was hard for me to understand, but really what a class is you can think of it as a list of functions, okay? So it has a file. So a class is basically a list of functions, right? Or methods, right? We defined methods previously, and we called methods functions, right? So the list of functions or methods, okay? And that's all that, and that's all that really is. A class is a list of methods, right? And a class, and these methods and these list of methods are written in a file, right? So in this example, going back, right, we had a list of methods, add, subtract, multiply, divide. We wrote it in a file, right? And we loaded the file into the robot, right? So the robot can perform the operations within the file, right? So, by the way, when I say operations, you can also think of it as a method. So operation functions or operations here, okay. Okay, and so what was our class in this case? Well, our class was math operations, right? Math operations was our class, right? It was the name of the class. Okay, so hopefully it makes more intuitive sense as to what these three terms are, right? So let's actually think about what would happen if we, let's say we wanted to make another object that performs the same operations as Alex, right? Alex was the robot that performed um, the math operations, right? Let's say we wanted to make another robot that performs the same operations that Alex can do, right? And let's say that so previously we had Alex here, okay, Alex, so I'll draw Alex here, okay. And now we want another robot, and this Alex can perform math operations, right? And I'll just say, just to make it short, add, subtract, multiply, and divide, right? By the way, in computer science, the asterisk is the symbol for multiplication, right? Okay. And let's say we want to make another robot. Let's name her Alexa, right? We want to make another robot that can perform the same operations as Alex can, right? Well, the power of object-oriented programming is such that we have already made a file, we have already written a file that has all the math operations, add, subtract, multiply, and divide, right? So we've already made the class called math operations that has a list of all these functions or methods, right? The power of object-oriented programming is you can load this file, right, into this robot, right? So you can say, let's actually load the file. So within this, we load the class math operations, okay? And now, right, Alexa can perform, after you load that, right, Alexa can now perform all the operations that Alex can, right? That is the 4 methods that Alex could perform. So one of the major powers of object-oriented programming is reusability, right? So the same file that you wrote, right, can now be loaded into multiple objects, right? As many objects as you want, right? Or I should say robots, right? And those robots can perform those exact operations. So now hopefully you understand what each of these terms means, object, methods, and class. And there are a few points that I want to make about these terms, especially in the context of Java. So now we're going to look at some Java syntax here. Particularly, we're going to look at the terms, or we're going to define the terms type and instantiation. Okay. So these two terms are pretty loosely used. They're kind of confusing when you first learn object-oriented programming, but hopefully you'll get a better sense of what these terms mean after this video, right? So let's say that, so at the start of the video, I said there's a robot or an object called named Alex, right? It can perform these math operations. Well, in Java, right, in Java, you have to make an object, right? So how do you build a robot? How do you build an object, right? So what you do is the template for that is class name. So let me actually, let's say you have class name here, okay. Okay, so this is a template to build an object, right? And then you can say name, or let's see, object name, okay. Object name okay. So this is a line you would put in the program, in the Java program, to create a new object, right? To create a new robot, right, so to speak. So in our example, you would say math operations, okay. You would say Alex, okay, and then you would say equals new math operations, okay. And this would create a new object, right, whose name is Alex, right? Don't worry about what goes on in these parentheses right here, right? For now, basically those are for some instance variables, and is to define some instance variables. So don't worry about what goes on in the parentheses. For now, just look at the syntax to make a new object, right? So what this really means is, oh, and we also created another object, right, named Alexa. So you can actually create two of these objects, right? Objects of math operations. Okay, you can create two of these. You can create an infinite number of these objects if you want, right, of class math operations. But we created two before, right? Alex and Alexa, right? So whenever you use the keyword new right here, right? So new right here, right? That basically means that you're creating a new object, right? And so this is where instantiation, the term instantiation comes in. Instantiation just means create or build, right, a new object, right? Okay. Or I can say a robot, machine, whatever, right? Okay. So imagine, just think about this for a second, right? So whenever you say instantiate, right, you are analogously, you are building or creating a robot, right? You are creating a robot that can perform, right, certain operations, right, or methods defined in the class. And instantiation, when we say instantiate, sometimes you'll see the word instantiate a class, okay? Or you'll see instantiate an object. Okay. The term instantiate is used quite loosely. In either case, right, instantiate a class, instantiate an object, they both mean the same thing, right? You're creating a new object. That's what it really means, right? And you're creating a new object of type, right? So this is where we use the word type. You create a new object, right? You build an object of type, um, right, class name, okay? So what do we mean by an object of type class name, right? Well, in this case, right, in our example, we saw that both Alex and Alexa, right, were robots that can perform the methods that were listed in the class math operations, right? And in fact, that's how we instantiated Alex and Alexa, right? We created them of type math operations, right? So math operations right here, okay? And when we say Alex is of type math operations or Alexa is of type math operations, we say that what we really mean is that Alex is a name of an object that can perform all the methods listed in the class math operations, right? So example, okay, so in our example, Alex, right? So I'll just use Alex is of type, okay, math operations, okay. And that basically means, right? So that is equivalent of saying, okay, oops. Alex, right, is the name, sorry, I should have used Alex, okay, is the name of an object that can perform all the methods listed in math operations. Okay. So that's it for this video. Hopefully that gives you a more intuitive understanding of what classes, objects, and methods are. If you want me to make more videos like these, just please comment below. I'll probably make a video on on what the syntax, the exact Java syntax is for writing a class. I gave you the prototype here, math operations, add, subtract, multiply, divide, but the exact Java, this is not the exact Java syntax, as I said.